I thought it'd be really cool to kind of go into this thing I've heard for a while. It's the 432 hertz frequency. Now, there's some conspiracy about Nazis and stuff like that, which we'll go over, and maybe there's some validity to it, but probably not. I don't know. It's like the internet used to be this wild west place where you go and find out information. Of course, some of it's true, some of it's not. But in the past, 10 years or so, there's been a concerted effort to just put out a melee of information to keep people in the dark about everything. I mean, there's just nuggets of truth everywhere, and you kind of got to put it together to see what's going on. But I found a couple videos that we can go over, and this really cool article about it. So let's jump into this some bitch about the 432 hertz conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory. All right. Yeah. That was stupid. All right. Into this. So this is from just a music blog. So this is quality information. But when I was looking at it and looking at other stuff, it's not bad. So we'll read through a little bit of this and then we'll go and watch a video about it. But would you believe that there is a conspiracy theory about the way we tune musical instruments? Now, just to give you guys, for anybody who's not familiar with tuning, there's a hertz that most music is tuned to, most popular music, and that's 440 hertz. And I'm not exactly sure why, and maybe this will get. I mean, that's just something that I've known since I started music, right? Like you just learn, like when you're tuning a guitar, and you can actually get these chromatic tuners that will change the hertz. So if you wanted to tune to 432 hertz, if you wanted to tune your guitar or something to it, it's a little bit more difficult to tune a piano to it because there's so many strings that you have to accompany it with. So for a guitar, it's easier to sort of manipulate the frequencies, but for other instruments, it's difficult and time consuming, and you have to have a good amount of knowledge on tuning and such, which I don't. I'm not a great piano tuner. I am very reliant on tuners. So there's this theory that involves the Nazis, chakras, and whatnot. No, then sit down. Oh, yeah, I see. No, you haven't heard of it? Then sit down and enjoy perhaps the most ridiculous conspiracy theories of all time. So already, this person who wrote this blog is already discounting the conspiracy, which is a great way to to start a conspiracy. So to understand what all the fuss about, we need a little bit of historical background. As you probably know, musical instruments need to be tuned. When you tune a tuning peg on a stringed instrument or adjust the length of the tube of a wind instrument, it makes a little bit of sound higher or lower. Okay, that's pretty easy to get behind. For different instruments and even different strings on one instrument, to sound good together, they all have to produce the same tone, same pitch when they play it. Yes. So you can't have your guitar or uke or piano tuned to a bunch of different frequencies because it'll sound out of tune and it'll be like it'll sound like me singing. So that's what you get. The usual way to specify a tuning is to give the frequency of a A440 or A4, excuse me. The modern standard is A440. And when they're talking about A4, they're talking about if you're looking at a piano, you start at one end, like if you start on the left, which is the lower end of the piano, and you move up 4 octaves. So you start with low A1, and that's a low A. And then you go A2, which is the next octave, A3, and then A4. So generally, I think middle C is C4. Is that right? C3, C4. Jeez, it's been a long time since college, so I don't use this shit anymore. So yeah, so it's the 4th octave in on a piano, or even or any instrument that has that many octaves on it. So A4, the modern standard is A440, where hertz is a unit meaning per second, hertz per second. So 440 hertz refers to 440 vibrations per second, such as those of a string. The tune is, to tune this we're doing good today, guys. To tune to this frequency, a musician would either listen to a tone played by some tuning device or tune by ear or use an electronic tuner. Now, there are freaks of nature out there who have perfect pitch where they can actually just hear a tone and just be like A3, or A4. I've known a couple people that have that talent. And they do tend to be a little spectrumy, which, nothing wrong with that. They just have an acute focus and ear for that kind of skill set. So it's pretty cool. I like that. I know people who can hear a complicated chord and can just sort of pick it out on a piano, be like, oh, it's this, and just play it. That's really cool to me. But it's definitely Anyways, if you Google 432 hertz, you will find a tremendous number of articles and YouTube videos about tuning to 432 hertz and its presumed healing and soothing properties. If you dig a little bit deeper, you will find an explanation of this phenomenon, presumably that 432 hertz tuning is in some way tuned to the vibrations of nature itself, whereas 440 hertz tuning was introduced by Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi minister of propaganda. Dun, dun, dun. Yes, that's right. There are millions of people in the world who believe that Goebbels, I don't know how to say that. I knew how to say it at one time, but introduced the tuning to make people feel more anxious. Now, why should 432 hertz be so great? According to proponents of the theory, the number 432 has special properties. And indeed, it is an interesting number. It is the sum of 4 consecutive primes, 103 plus 107 plus 109 plus 113. It is exactly 3 gross, where gross equals 144 is a traditional unit. An equilateral triangle whose area and perimeter are equal has the area of exactly square root of 432. And listen to me just bleh. And the Grammy goes to me. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh my God, thank you. Oh, you guys are too much. You guys. Oh, sit down. Sit down. Oh. Oh my God, thank you guys. You guys are just so beautiful. Moving Dutchman, welcome in. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Good to see you, my friend. Welcome in. So there now this is in connection to the Fibonacci. Let's look at that. It's a sequence that supposedly is connected to the mathematics of the universe. So there is this weird connection to it. So I can't even Fibonacci. Thank you. Then you will find many mystical arguments, such that there are 432 Buddha statues on Mount Meru, or that it is somehow related to the location of chakras. There is even claim that scientists at Nike found out that the best golf balls have 432 dimples. Why the numerological explanations of 432 hertz are all nonsense. Okay, so this is where we're going to step away, because I just wanted to sort of get an idea of where we're going with this. Now, the thing about 432 hertz is that it is actually, they have done studies on this frequency. And it's really interesting. I mean, these are studies done by the NIH, which is the National Library, what is the NIH? I forgot. Are they American? Jesus Christ, look at me go. National Institute of Health, and they are a U.S. department. Wow. We're going today. We're cooking today, y'all. We're cooking with butter. Fat boy butter. So so they did this double blind study, right? The listening to music tuned to 440 hertz versus 432 hertz to reduce anxiety, stress, in emergency nurses during COVID, a double-blind randomized controlled pilot study. So the abstract is here. The background aim: healthcare providers in the emergency first response units have been exposed to considerable stress during the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic. So this is a study they did during the pandemic, why people were on high stress and they were worried about catching this this novel disease that was leaked from a lab in Wuhan. And they were looking to find a frequency to see if the 432 hertz frequency would actually alleviate stress and anxiety caused and brought on by COVID. So here's the aim, right? Okay, healthcare providers in the emergency first response units have been exposed to a considerable stress during the COVID pandemic. The study was designed to identify the effects of listening to music during the work break compared to the routine break in the absence of listening to music, on the level of state anxiety and on the vital parameters of the nurses on duty at the operations center. So, here's what they found, right? So overall, 54 healthcare providers were enrolled, 32 female, mean age 39.64 years. Total measurements performed were 83. The median values, okay, so you can read this if you want. Here's the conclusion. Listening to music at 432 hertz is a low cost and short intervention that can be a useful resource to manage anxiety and stress. Further studies are needed to assess the medium and long-term effects of listening to music. So it's really interesting, right? So they're talking about alleviating stress brought on by these, crazy circumstances. I mean, anybody in an emergency room setting, right? Any kind of nurse or doctor in the emergency room is always on high alert, always just sort of pumping away. So these frequencies may help, and is proven in this study, to actually alleviate stress. So there is something to it, right? It's not like this is just some made up number. Again, there is numerological origins, and again, the Fibonacci sequence, which I have a hard time understanding any of that shit. So here's another one where they're trying to see if it would. What was their objective here? The objective is to identify differences in vital parameters and perceptions after listening to music at different frequencies, 440 hertz versus 432 hertz. So these are like for real studies that they're doing out there. So the conclusion was the data suggests that 432 hertz tuned music can decrease heart rate more than 440 hertz tuned music, which is a big thing, like dropping heart rate, being able to control your heart rate or drop it, that is connected to alleviating anxiety, stress, and we all know that stress and anxiety leads to a whole bunch of horrible health problems. So it's very interesting that this specific frequency is connected to healing. Now, I don't know if that's what Carla did in her music. Carla Petulio, who's going to be on the show here in the next 40 minutes, or 50 minutes, excuse me. But I'm really interested to ask her about this because, again, she was using healing tones and frequencies in her latest album and her Grammy Award-winning album. So interesting, right? And there's a ton more, right? There's a ton more articles that music tuned 432, improving sleep in patients with spinal cord injuries, heart music for vascular. And we know that music is one of those things that can get you pumped, can bring you down, it can make you happy, it can make you sad, it can make you feel melancholy. Music and frequencies all have an extreme effect on the body because we are frequency, right? Like we are just frequencies. We are atoms that are vibrating at a specific frequency that make up Mikey P, right? We're just vibrating atoms that give the illusion that I am a solid gelatinous, mostly gelatinous mass of person. Uh, and that was what's like. If you guys saw Oppenheimer, I loved how he was explaining that to people. There's a moment in the movie where he's talking to one of his lady friends who he's about to bang out, and he was trying to explain that. I believe he was using like a shelf or a table or something. But this desk right here is it perceived to be a solid mass, but it's really a bunch of atoms that are vibrating at a specific frequency that create this. I'm sure this is just layered wood that they mash together, but very, very interesting shit. So you have to think, if we are made of frequency, then frequency has to have an effect on our bodies, minds. I want to, let me I can't spell shit. Let's look at what the definition, or at least a little bit more of the Fibonacci sequence, which I misspelled terribly. I'm so awesome. We'll have AI teach us. The Fibonacci sequence was developed by an Italian mathematician in the 13th century. Fibonacci discovered the sequence while traveling to the Middle East and in India and learned about the Hindu Arabic numeral system. The Fibonacci sequence can be applied to finance using 4 techniques. That's interesting. I didn't know it could be applied to finance. Fibonacci sequence also derives from the golden ratio, 1.618. If the series is extended out indefinitely, the ratio approaches 1.618 colon 1. I don't know what that means, friends. I don't know what this shit means. I'm fucking dumb. 3 branches. The sequence begins in the growth of the trunk, then spirals outwards, and as the tree gets larger and taller. And one of the things is that we see this in different shapes, right? Like, so they bring up the Nautilus shells. We see it in star shapes of galaxies, right? Like that spiral out sort of thing. Let's look at some images of it. So here is the mathematic graphed equation right here. But you see it in a lot of different designs. You see it in flowers, right? You see it in nature. You see it, look, the sacred geometry. They say it's sacred geometry. Right here's the shell. So it's this very common thing that we see across the universe and in our day-to-day lives, right? So this number of 432 hertz has a connection to this as well. And so it's sort of this vibration that runs throughout the universe, through our entire existence, essentially. So it's a very interesting number. Oh, here's that fucking thing. Okay, so here is like a universe spiral. Here is a it looks like it's a storm cloud system, right, where it's swirling out. And then of course here is the shell of like a snail or something. So it's something that we see a lot. Really cool shit, man. Like, it gets super deep. And I believe this is a hurricane, right? Like, that's the shape of a hurricane. I could be wrong. I'm not a meteorologist. So this number is very it's a really cool number, right? Yeah, that's a hurricane. Thank you, Demogorgon. So let's watch a little bit of this video here and check it out, because they go in a little deeper, and then they also talk about 428 hertz as well. Now, the 440 hertz thing, the history behind that, which we should probably go into that, because The thing is that before 1939, all music was tuned to, I believe, to 432 hertz. I think they say it in this video. I've watched like 10 videos on this, so it's fucking, I can't keep them all together, y'all. I know because I live in Florida. Hell yeah, you know. Oh, Lord. Florida's a fun place. You know what? Did you guys see that video where the... Shit is so funny. Where that cop was saying is like, if someone breaks into your house, shoot them. We encourage you to shoot them. Let's just take a pause for the cause because that shit was so funny. And a huge win. Florida cop encourages shooting Bud Light intruders. Is this him? No, this is 3 years ago. I think it's this guy. No, it was like super recent. Oh man, where is it? Florida's wild, dude. I mean, I've been to Florida a few times. It's a cool spot. Lots of hurricanes. I mean, yeah, people down in Florida are fucking nuts. Shooting is the only way to get them, get the hell out. Listen, I'm not against stand your ground. I am not against that. I think I reposted this actually. Let me see if it's still in my stories. Oh man, I'm getting blowed up. One of my comments is kind of going viral right now, so I've been getting a bunch of bullshit going on. Let me look at this. This chick was awesome, actually. Oh, dude, fucking thick Selena Gomez. She's pretty hot. The Yellowstone Star says he was kicked off a plane for refusing to sit next to somebody with a mask. I just thought that was funny. Oh, here he is. This dude right here. Let's go. This is the dude. This is my homie right here, boy.
To shoot him in Santa Rosa County. We prefer that you do, actually. So, whoever that was, you're not in trouble. Come see us. We have a gun safety class we put on every other Saturday. And if you take that, you'll shoot a lot better, and hopefully you'll save the taxpayers money.
Yeah, whoever shot that motherfucker, you're not in trouble. We encourage it. I mean, one time someone got high in bath salts, and one time, ate someone. Dude, that was so awesome. We talked about this. We talked about that on this podcast. That's how old this podcast is. We actually had a whole discussion about fucking zombie bath salt people in Florida. I mean, Florida is like, they have a whole thing called Florida Man. Anyways, we diverted for a second there. Anyways, going back to this video. That shit is so funny to me. All right, let's check out a little bit of this video.
There has been much debate over the years as to which frequency of sound is more beneficial to humans. The 432 Hz frequency because of its long relation to music and also health benefits. Others claim that the 528 Hz one is the superior frequency we should be using. Each side of the discussion has some solid arguments which are rooted in history, mathematics, science, music, and above all else, wellness. But which frequency is actually best for us? What are the similarities and differences, if any, between these two? How can somebody pick between two frequencies that have been proven over time to stimulate and enhance humans? From tuning forks to instruments that can record sounds in space, and from ancient geniuses to today's scientists, there are plenty of options and information out there to help anyone make the right decision between these two frequencies.
Oh boy.
All it takes is a bit of research and an open mind about what you are likely to find.
Let's stay open, folks.
What is the 432 Hz frequency? For many people, the 432 Hz frequency is already something quite familiar that they use every day. But for those that don't know much about it, here are a few things you should be aware of.
That girl. This girl fucking hippie dancing.
But for those that don't know much about it, here are a few things you should be aware of. First of all, this is one of the oldest frequencies ever used in tuning. It's so old, in fact, that there were instruments found in Egyptian sites that suggest it was used by the singers of the day. Yes, those instruments didn't necessarily have too much range to them, but archaeologists could still measure what kind of sounds they made and see what their frequency was. The 432 Hz frequency is mentioned pretty often in music history. That's because this is the frequency that Verdi and other composers used to tune their instruments before playing them. Although the composers liked using the 432 frequency, in 1939, it was decided to standardize all tuning to a 440 Hz frequency. There have been a lot of
So, a lot of people say what was going on during 1939, right? Like what big event in 1939 could have shifted this whole hertz frequency of music, right? So, World War II obviously was going on at this time. And that's how people started being like, oh, it was the fucking Nazis, man. Well, you know what? The Nazis could have, because also the Nazis are blamed for putting fluoride in the water to keep their people docile, right? So there's a lot of stuff that people say about the Nazis that, may or may not be true. But again, we're keeping open minds here.
Of theories about this move, some of them even including the Nazis and the Rockefeller Foundation. Others even go further and say that the entire music industry is being used to corrupt people by using music designed to play at a 440 Hz frequency and so stimulate the aggressive side of people.
It wasn't until 1939 that an international conference held in London recommended to use A440 as a compromise between the various tuning systems used at the time, some of which reached beyond 450 Hz. In fact, the BBC required their orchestras to tune to A440 instead of A439 because 439 is a prime number, and that frequency was difficult to generate electronically with standard electronic clock.
The 432 Hz frequency is also closer to the Schumann resonance, or the frequency of the Earth. The Schumann resonance is at around 8 Hz, so tuning any instrument to a multiple of that, which 432 is, would give anyone doing so a much sharper sound, more in tune with the natural world around them. Granted, some may say that the Schumann resonance has changed over time, and it may not be a perfect 8 Hz, but considering that Schumann resonance was first measured in 1960, that's a pretty good match. 432 also appears in texts about the Great Flood, as described by the Babylonians. For them, 432,000 years passed between the moment of creation and the Great Flood. And they're not the only ancient civilization to connect this number to important things in their culture. Ancient Egyptians integrated numbers into their pyramids. The Great Pyramid is 1 to 43,200 in relation to the Earth as a matter of size.
And then what about Khufu, the Great Pyramid? Okay, so you've got a pi and a phi.
What about Khufu?
Phi pyramid here. You can see on the right the phi pyramid. If the half base is 1, then the height is the root of phi and the hypotenuse is phi. Unbelievable. And if the half base is pi, then the height is 4. And you've got the 7-11 ratio there of base to height. And normally it's given as 440 Egyptian royal cubits for the base and 280 for the height. But if you give the base in the long cubits, it's 432. The base of the Great Pyramid is 432 long cubits. And if you take the height, unbelievable, it's 432 times that 711.
Stonehenge also has some
I have no idea what the fuck he was just saying.
interesting connections to the number. Dividing the Platonic year of 25,920 by the number of stones used to construct the monument, which is 60, we get precisely 432. So ancient civilizations weren't so ignorant about the number as some may think.
I mean, some of this is kind of a stretch. I don't know. But I'm not a mathematician. I'm not a historian. I'm a fucking half-ass musician, so...
Even more so, they managed to include it in a lot of their works and even used it to do complex mathematical equations. That makes the number itself a part of both nature and the civilizations that have developed over time. What about the 528 Hz frequency?
Yeah, what about it?
Maybe not as well known as the 532 Hz frequency, the 528 Hz has supporters that say it's even more important than the former. Although this can't really be confirmed in any way, the 528 Hz frequency has some interesting connections to history, science, and nature.
And like we gotta keep in mind as well is like there's actually been and there might be some studies. I didn't even look into the 528, but there's actually studies that can confirm that 432 hertz is a more appealing tone or frequency that doesn't line up with apparently the Earth's frequency. I didn't know that either.
As well. When music was first theorized, 6 solfeggio frequencies were defined. This was one of them. Many say that this might even be the most important of them because it's the one considered to be used in many ancient religious chants. Although this idea has been disputed, many musical instruments found dating back thousands of years have been proven to be tuned to this frequency, or at least be capable of producing sounds that vibrate at that frequency. There are also
Oh.
some very impressive examples in our times of artists using the 528 Hz frequency to create music.
There's 9 core creative frequencies. In fact, these are the perfect circle of sound. This is called the perfect circle of sound. There's 9 notes that creates everything in the universe. The third note in that sequence is 528. The old original solfeggio, ancient musical scale that had 6 notes. These are 9 now, it completes the circle. But the first notes were not do, re, mi, but ut, re, mi. Mi stands for mira gestorum in Latin, or miracles in English. So the miracle note of the universe is love. The miracle note of the universe is 528 Hertz frequency, and it's the heart of everything.
But the 528 Hz frequency
That's kinda
isn't
cool.
limited to just music. Because light travels similarly to sound, this frequency can be used to express a light wavelength. And because the color is simple light perceived at various wavelengths, the 528 Hz frequency can be expressed as a part of the electromagnetic color spectrum. Some may be surprised that this frequency is very close to the center of that spectrum. It can even be linked to other celestial bodies. Just like 432 has a direct connection to the Earth, the 528 Hz frequency has a connection to the Sun. That's because the Sun has a measurable sound emitting from it at 528 Hz. Over time, scientists and researchers have also made a connection between Saturn and the 528 Hz frequency. That's because just as the Earth has its frequency that resonates into space, so do the other planets. And Saturn's has been measured to be at 528 Hz. 528 can also be found in math. The number is a Pythagorean one, and also has various implications in finding the value of pi and phi, both very important to ancient builders and mathematicians. Without these numbers, the pyramids themselves wouldn't have been constructed. Also, measurement units such as miles couldn't have existed. That's because there are exactly 5,280 feet in a mile.
Oh,
It wasn't
bitch.
528. You wouldn't have circles. You wouldn't have squares. You wouldn't have any sacred geometry. You wouldn't have pyramids. The pyramids are intimately constructed based on the mathematics of pi, phi. You wouldn't have pi or phi without 528. In other words, you wouldn't have anything without love.
Where do the frequencies differ?
Dang.
Although-
All you need is love, baby. Where was the? I had another one pulled up. Okay, yeah, this one. So let's jump into this one.
Was
now.
it deliberately? What frequency hides the harmony of the universe, and was it deliberately taken away from us?
Was
One
it?
of the most existential questions of our time.
Wait a minute. I want to make sure that I had that correct. So, because where did I see 432 hertz connects with Fibonacci sequence? Did I get that all wrong? Is not a okay. So I got that Fibonacci sequence, blah, 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 and so on. It is not a Fibonacci number. Oh, I'm such an asshole, guys. The sequence found by adding up two numbers. Okay, the ratio is divine proportion to the golden ratio. God damn it. 430. It claims to be Pythagoras, a Greek philosopher, mathematician, defines pitch differences between two notes. Where did I see that? Someone was trying to wait, hold on. 432 hertz. Fibonacci. Look, people are just like, nah, it's Fibonacci, baby. That was just generative AI answering, by the way. 42 this is 432 hertz related abstract blog Fibonacci and tuning, the golden ratio and Fibonacci sequence. So it's not in the number. Okay, well, in any case, we learned about the Fibonacci sequence, all right? Fucking misinformation. All right, going back.
This is where the conspiracy comes from. At some point, governments around the world issued a decree ordering everyone to tune to 440 hertz. There is said to be something sinister about the frequency of 440 hertz. It is said that the Rockefeller Foundation had an interest in ensuring that the United States adopted the 440 hertz standard in 1935 as part of the war on consciousness, leading to control of
war
the
on
musical
consciousness.
cult. This theory says that tuning all the music in the world to 440 hertz turns it into a weapon of war. Is this so? There are many serious studies confirming the destructive influence of the 440 Hz frequency on humanity. There are those who dispute the theory. But are they convincing enough, or just a handful of dust in the eyes? We are about to find out in this video.
And he has an accent, so you know it's for real.
The A key is the musical key that represents the starting point for tuning musical instruments. A device called a tuning fork always picks up the A tone in the same way, but it arose only in 1711. How then were musical instruments tuned before then? The answer is that the musicians used their ears. They tuned the notes to each other and the instruments to each other. They knew the pitches or the frequencies without even having that scientific knowledge, and which ones sounded good to them together. After all, many early works use a gland frequency of up to 432 Hz for the A tone, tuned just by feel. Interesting, isn't it? However, how does the change from 432 Hz to 440 Hz allegedly affect people? It is said that as a result of it, people begin to think and feel in a certain way. They plunge into inner chaos. In 1953, Goebbels' decree was approved by the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. A change was made and 440 Hz was introduced as the standard, despite the protests of Professor Dassault of the Paris Conservatoire, who wrote a referendum signed by 23,000 French musicians. They have insisted that the tuning frequency of the La tone of 432 Hz not be changed in order to preserve musical harmony and the musical vibration of the universe. According to the conspiracy theory, the La tone tuned to 432 Hz was quite deliberately hidden from the world, because this is the point of balance in nature. 432 Hz is a vibration represented in the principle of the golden ratio, also known as the golden ratio or divine proportion, and unites the properties of light, time, space, matter, gravity and magnetism to biology, the DNA code and consciousness. The natural tuning of 432 Hz has profound effects on consciousness at the cellular level in our body. By tuning musical instruments and using them at 432 Hz instead of 440 Hz, atoms and DNA begin to resonate in harmony with the spiral of the golden ratio in nature, shares Brian T. Collins. The simplest explanation is found in the argument that a note has 12 harmonics because it resonates with 12 notes of the musical scale with the middle and sustained tones. These 12 harmonics are present when a note is tuned to 432 Hz. Music tuned to 440 Hz is said to be much poorer. The frequency of planet Earth is 8 Hz. Alpha waves, the frequency of the brain in a relaxed state, are also waves with a frequency of 8 Hz. But when we listen to music tuned to 440 Hz, it makes this fundamental 8 Hz change to 8.25 Hz, which means that the harmonics generated are out of harmony with the planet. Humans vibrate in the frequency range of 16 to 32 Hz, which is equivalent to the musical scale from low C to high C, or 1 octave. The setting of 440 Hz is not harmonic with the frequency of the human being because the fundamental becomes 16.5. When we listen to music at 440 Hz, the first thing we notice is lethargy, tiredness, a desire to do nothing. And this happens because the harmonics of this music do not correspond to a person's vibrational frequency.
So, now, I know that there's a lot of music that's tuned to A440 that gets your ass pumped up, right? Like, and there's ones that make you feel good and stuff. So, I think it's a way that you use the frequencies as well, in the way that you put music together. But hold on, we'll come back to this. So look at this. Is this one that we just looked at? 440 versus 432. Unveiling the secrets. 432. Listening 440 hertz. So they're all comparing it. So it does seem to raise your blood or raise your heart rate and such. So let's go back here. I thought there was never mind. Never mind what I thought. Scratch that. Edit this part out, Mike.
Archaic Egyptian instruments that have been discovered so far are mostly tuned to 432 Hz. Music is vibration, energy. Each person's voice has its own sound frequency. Thoughts are also waves that are filled with either harmony or dissonance. For centuries, Indian philosophers have been treating and maintaining people's health with the help of speech. In the book, The Secret Power of Music, David Tyme claims that there is not a single function in the human body that is not subject to music. Research shows that music affects digestion, internal secretion, blood circulation, nutrition, breathing, etc. It affects the body in two ways, with a direct effect, that is, influence of sound on cells and organs, and indirectly, through the impact on emotions, which in turn influence many processes in the human body.
Internal body secretions, like your body. You can. What are you secreting in there with those frequencies, sir? That's. I mean, this shit is really fascinating.
Another theory states that our subconscious, our organism understands that the frequency of 432 Hz is an awakening, an opening of the heart center of love, harmony, and joy. It is called the frequency of the universe. And 440 Hz is a mental level, the level of the ego, of control, fear, and power. We can also hear that music with a frequency of 432 Hz soothes, sounds clear and pleasant to the ear, positively affects the chakras, expands the feelings through the heart chakra, and accelerates our spiritual growth. Archaic Egyptian instruments have been found that were tuned to a frequency of 432 Hz. In ancient Greece, musical instruments were also mostly tuned to 432 Hz, as were the instruments of Orpheus. Plato, Hippocrates, Aristotle, Pythagoras, and other great thinkers and philosophers of antiquity possessed invaluable knowledge about the healing effect of music on man and cured many diseases precisely with the power of music. Recently, the American mathematician and historian J. Kennedy, who works at the University of Manchester in Great Britain, announced that he had discovered the secret code hidden in the works of Plato. Kennedy argues that Plato shared the Pythagorean notions of the music of the spheres as the musical harmony of the universe, and built his works on the laws of musical harmony. These original sound frequencies were also used in ancient Gregorian chants, such as the Great Hymn of St. John the Baptist.
Oh man, I remember studying this in college.
These original sound
This is how music was originally. Well, some music was originally written, but it was very, very basic, right? But it still had the lines, and it still had a key signature the way that they did it, but they had these very simple block notations, which is really interesting, honestly. And there's a lot of people who like go back and recreate these songs and noises, these specific note, and like I don't remember what the quantity of each note is. I think it has something to do with how close they are together, because in regular notation there's like 8 notes, there's quarter notes, whole notes, and each note and the way each note is written, you look at a note on these lines, and then how the note is filled in or has a little flag on it tells you the duration of each note. It's a terrible way of explaining it because, hey, that's me. But these are all just blocks, right? Like these don't have any flags. There's nothing to indicate like how fast or how long each note should be held. So my guess is that they're using the distance between each block as a way of measuring duration.
Frequencies were also used in ancient Gregorian chants, such as the Great Hymn of St. John the Baptist.
Okay, so here you go.
According to church authorities, they were laws of musical harmony. These original sound frequencies were also used in ancient Gregorian chants, such as...
So right here you can see that there's sort of a flag. So you can see there is some different ways that they were writing notation, but it was and see, here's like a dot, right? Like a dotted note. Here's like 2 notes connected together so people know that this continues to go down. So you're like, So there was different ways of of understanding the notation, and as music got more complicated, as more instruments were created, the notation became more complicated. And when you see like, a piece by Mozart, or you just see tons of just ties and little flags, and you see I suck at explaining music, guys. But you'll see like piano, you'll see piano written down somewhere. There's just so much to be paying attention to. Like notation is crazy. It's another language.
Was the great hymn of St. John the Baptist. According to church authorities, they were lost many centuries ago. These powerful frequencies were discovered by Dr. Joseph Puleo and described in Dr. Leonard Horwitz's book, The Healing Codes for Biological Apocalypse.
Oh, golly.
Here are the healing codes of the notes in the tonal scale according to this theory. Up to 396 Hertz, freedom from guilt and fear. 417 Hertz, erases traumatic experiences and facilitates change.
Oh?
528 Hertz, can bring about beautiful transformation and miracles in life, DNA restoration, resonates with the human body and nature. 639 improves and strengthens relationships with others. 741 Hertz, awakening intuition, provides the power of self-expression, cleanses toxins at the cellular level. 852 Hertz, return to spiritual order. The frequency of 432 Hertz is obtained in an interesting way. 24 hours times 60 minutes times 60 seconds equals 86,000. 400 divided by 2 equals 43,200. It is here, however, that the theory loses ground and is contested. From another theory that argues that arguments for numerical or mystical properties of the number 432 are untenable.
All right, here we go.
It is important to understand that 432 Hertz refers to the number of vibrations per second, and 1 second is a rather arbitrary unit. But how come 1 second is 1 second? Originally, from ancient times until the Middle Ages, an hour was divided into 2, 3, 4 or 12 equal parts, but never into 60, so that even the concept of a minute did not exist. Fractions of a minute were not used at all, because there were no devices that could measure such short periods of time. If we had stuck with dividing everything into 12 parts, a second could be 1/12 of a minute, or perhaps 1 divided by 17/28 of an hour. 17/28 equals 12 times 12 times 12, which would give a completely different numerical value for the same frequency. This leads to the conclusion that the current definition is just a coincidence.
Oh!
The practice of dividing a minute into 60 smaller segments did not appear until the 16th century. And even then, different clocks measured at slightly different speeds.
Right.
To standardize the measurement of time, people define units of time by taking an average of the length of a day, which is some fraction of a year, which they then measure as the time it takes the Earth to rotate on its axis relative to the Sun. The first clocks that could track seconds more accurately over longer periods were not constructed until the 18th century. However, here we come to an even bigger but. In the 1940s, scientists discovered that the Earth's rotation rate was not constant, and the second was eventually redefined as the duration of the 9,192,631,770 radiation periods corresponding to the transition between the two hyperfine levels of the ground state of the cesium-133 atom.
What?
Here the theory
The
mockingly
fuck?
concludes that 432 Hertz is clearly the divine tuning of nature itself, which is ultimately defined as one vibration for some periods of emission of some chemical element. Continuing the theory, it is said that in Bach's era, there was no standardized way of tuning instruments. The same piece could sound much higher or lower depending on where and when it was performed. The pitch of musical instruments changes over time, even due to heat and mechanical wear. So until the tuning fork was invented in 1711, there was no way to make adjustments, so that there was harmony between different regions, and even performances in one region. However, even after the invention of the tuning fork, there was no single standardized tuning. The relationship between the thickness of the string and its tension is also added. The higher the tension, the higher the sound, and the thicker the string, the lower the sound. This is why the double bass has huge thick strings while the violin has thin strings. It turns out that strings sound better up to a certain point when their tension is higher. However, the supply of thicker strings was not so easy in the 19th century. Making strings was a complicated procedure, so instead of changing the manufacturing process, it was much easier to tune the same strings to higher levels to increase the tension and thus improve the sound. Orchestras, competing with each other for better sound, began to tune their instruments higher and higher. This eventually led to problems for the singers. The theory goes that, at the insistence of singers, the French government made the 435 Hz tuning officially standard in France in 1859, and many orchestras and opera houses in Europe adopted this standard. In Great Britain, however, the French standard was misinterpreted. It was understood to be relative to a certain temperature, which is why British orchestras usually tuned to 439 Hz. In 1939, there was an international conference held in London which resulted in the recommendation that 440 Hz be used as a compromise between the various tuning systems in use at the time, some of which went above 450 Hz. Eventually, in 1955, the 440 Hz standard was adopted by the International Organization for Standardization, ISO. Virtually all commercially produced modern music today is tuned to 440 Hz. However, some symphony orchestras ignore the standard and tune to 441, 442 or 443 Hz.
Ooh,
While
rebels.
orchestras specializing in older music may sometimes use a tuning close to that for which the piece was written, which can range from 415 Hz to 470 Hz. Having laid out the facts on both sides of the argument, we would be very interested to know what your opinion is on the matter. Is the frequency of 440 Hz a manipulation or just a standard with which music already sounds the same all over the world? Don't forget to support.
Look at that. Interesting shit, man. That's interesting shit. The what's really interesting about this video was that they said something about Goebbels at the beginning, that he did have some sort of influence on the 440 hertz, or was that just it comes right up. That's funny. Let's see what it says. Debunking social media claims. I see. So he represented the meeting. So this is from Sam Ash, which is, I don't even know if they're still a company that sells instruments. So maybe he was there representing Germany and pushing for 440. So maybe that's where it comes from. Let's take a look, honestly. This is really interesting. Music has been around for thousands of years. So what did the first group? Okay, blah, blah, blah. Though it's intriguing to find uniformity in the ancient world, many different types of scales, blah, blah, blah. 1711, 1830. Where did the 440 hertz standard come from? So, by the way, Sam Ash, again, is a music store, and I believe it's all just online now. All orchestra instruments have a A string, so tuning to A, the A above middle C, was probably the simplest thing to do, but deciding upon the pitch of this A wasn't so simple. Musicians and composers in many locations began to experiment with different tuning standards in hertz, including whole numbers and decimal values. For years, there was tons of variations. Okay. Got that. Though Paris, Vienna, and other cities all over Europe developed their own standards, blah, blah, blah. Famous Italian composer and center of the first parliament of Italy, Giuseppe Francesco Verdi. God, I suck. Famous, who had composed music in several tunings, wrote a letter in the 1880s trying to convince the government's Italian Music Commission to switch the standard 432 hertz, feeling that it was more mathematically sound than the higher pitch proposal of 450. Thanks to Verdi and other proponents, Italy, France, and certain performance groups like theaters and operas throughout Europe and the United States kept the standard between 432 hertz and 435 for a while. 1910. Okay, so the Nazis supported the tuning of 440 hertz 2 decades later and became the first to advocate for this to become the worldwide standard. Nazi politician Reich Minister for Public Enlightenment and Propaganda, Joseph Goebbels controlled Radio Berlin and organized an international conference in 1939. So Goebbels was the one who actually organized the conference. And so 1939, the Nazis are still, I guess that's not the heart of the war, but the Nazis had come to power and they're pushing this frequency. In 1939, to determine a standard for concert pitch, Goebbels represented Germany at the meeting where he pushed and voted for A440. In organizing this meeting, he was, of course, in control of the guest list, and not a single French composer was asked to attend. Is that why they invaded France? I guess they were just trying to invade all of Europe. At the time, the referendum by Professor Dussault of the Paris Conservatory of 23,000 French musicians voted overwhelmingly for A32. No wonder they weren't invited. That was their little subtext there. Though A440 was agreed upon at this biased meeting, shortly after it took place, World War II broke out, so the number didn't stick right away. Okay, so 1939 was the year that it started. I don't know. I'm an idiot. In 1971, the proposed tuning standard was still ignored around the world by Russia, Britain, and Vienna Philharmonic in Austria, and used other tunings, including but not limited to 435, 425, and 450 hertz. The decision in 1939 International Conference, though unsuccessful at the time it took place, ultimately prevailed to a large extent when the International Organization of Standardization accepted for A440 as the official standard pitch in 1955, which they reaffirmed in 1975. This still stands to date. That's so interesting. So it was proposed by the Nazis. Now, was it proposed by the Nazis because they think that 440 is a stressful and a disconcerting frequency? I don't know. Maybe that was just something. Maybe at the time Goebbels was trying to just find something for everyone to agree on. But it is strange that we decided to go with the Nazi suggestion. Here's where the disagreement still lies. Everyone has their own preference, though many people contributed to and took part in this number dispute, ranging from professional musicians and composers to physicists and others who held non-music related professions. There is still a lack of consensus on which frequency standard is best. Well, yeah, and here's the thing. I like one of my friends. He made his last song in A432, and he's the one who actually told me about this a while ago. And because of our guest today, I wanted to sort of look into it. And if you use A440, does that make you a Nazi? No, it doesn't. But it is interesting that its origins come from Nazi Germany. So that what a weird way to sort of find consensus, right? Now, all this scientific research on 432, I believe there's validity to it. There's tons of research on it. Does A440 make you feel crazy, or I don't know? And was that the intentions? I doubt it. But it seems like A440 was just a solid number that we could all just a consensus that we could all sort of tune to make sure that when, if you're a violist from Germany and you're playing in the Vienna Symphony, that you show up and you're in tune with them. Now, of course, they can always change that. And like we found out that there's symphonies bands. There's all kinds of different ways of tuning, so it doesn't really matter. But it's something that we can all agree on and show up and in tune and ready to go. Now, if you get to the symphony and they're like, hey, this is what we tune to in A432, then, there's nothing hard about that. You just, especially if you have electronic, a chromatic tuner, you can easily just bump down the frequency and go from there. But it's a consensus number. So is it a conspiracy? I don't think so. It doesn't seem like it. But there is some validity to the healing natures and properties of 432. And what was it? 528? Was that what the other one was? 432. 528. So that's really fucking cool. Okay. So let me get ready for what's her face. Carla, who should be popping on here shortly. I have to go pee. So why don't I go pee? I'll come back and get set up because we're getting down to the wire here. Getting down to the wire, y'all. So let me open up my thingy bobber here first. I need to get a pen too. I need to get a pendejo. Where is this thing? Where is it? There it is. I found it. Boom. Alrighty. All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break and I'm going to go potty, grab a pen, and we'll be back. And our guest should be with us shortly. So give me a moment. And here's some videos that may or may not work. Where is it? My God. My God. All right.